The phone rang just before midnight. It was Mark. "I work with your wife," said an unfamiliar voice on the other end. "Could you come pick her up?" "What happened?" I asked, my heart starting to race. "She just had a bit too much to drink. We're at the Grand Restaurant." I was immediately on edge. Usually, her company events were held at the office or small cafes. The Grand was an upscale place, and she hadn't mentioned anything about celebrating there. Why hadn't she called me herself? "Her phone died," the man explained. "She asked specifically for you to come." Something felt off. 20 minutes later, I was there. The dining room was nearly empty, except for a few waiters and a couple of people at the bar. I spotted my wife, Emily, right away. She was slumped in a corner, her head resting on her shoulder. "Emily," I called out. She didn't respond. Standing next to her was the man who had called me, Mark. He looked uneasy. "Sorry about this," he said. "No one wanted to take her home, and we knew you lived nearby." I glanced at Emily, then back at him. "She had a lot to drink," he added. On the table was a half-empty glass of wine and a gift box. My eyes narrowed. "Who gave her that?" I asked. Mark hesitated. "I'm not sure." I opened the box. Inside was an expensive perfume, and on the packaging was a note, "With best wishes, A." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Who's A?" I demanded. Mark avoided my gaze. "Listen, I shouldn't be the one to tell you this," he said, exhaling deeply. "It's Alex. He works with us. He left about 20 minutes ago." I looked back at Emily. She was mumbling something in her sleep. I lifted her up, tossed the gift box back on the table, and headed for the exit. Mark muttered another apology, but I didn't respond. My mind was racing. Who the hell is Alex? Emily didn't wake up, even during the car ride home. She mumbled incoherently, but I couldn't make out any words. When we got home, I shook her shoulder a couple of times. "Emily, wake up," I said. She groaned but didn't open her eyes. I sighed, carried her inside, and laid her on the couch in the living room. I took off her shoes, and she turned away, still muttering. I decided to check her purse. Her phone was dead, her wallet was intact, but something caught my attention, a delicate gold bracelet I'd never seen before. I picked it up and noticed an engraving on the clasp, 2/14. I sat down in the chair across from her, rolling the bracelet in my hand. Mark had mentioned that Alex left 20 minutes before I arrived, which meant he'd been with her all evening. I looked at Emily, still asleep, and a cold, uneasy feeling washed over me. I plugged her phone into charge. A minute later, the screen lit up. As it powered on, I found a receipt that had fallen out of her purse when I was looking for her phone. It was from the Grand Restaurant, dated today, for $270. But what struck me as odd was that the payment wasn't made from her card. I squinted at the name on the receipt, Alexander Carter. I stared at the receipt, then at the bracelet in my hand. Pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. I unlocked her phone and checked her messages. The last conversation was with a contact named A. "Thanks for tonight. It was unforgettable," Emily had written. The reply from A was, "You deserve more." My fists clenched. I walked over to the couch and looked at her, still asleep. I gripped the phone tightly. Tomorrow, we would have a serious conversation. The next morning, Emily woke up late. I was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee. She walked in, rubbing her forehead. "My head is killing me," she muttered. "What time is it?" "Almost 11, I replied. Her eyes widened. "I slept that long. Do you remember how I got home?" I watched her carefully. "Vaguely," she said, sitting down at the table. "The company party ended, and then nothing." I kept my tone neutral. Do you remember who you were with? Just colleagues. Mark was there, and some of the girls. And Alex, I think. She blinked, then hesitated. Yeah, we were all together. Why? I pretended to think for a moment. The waiter gave me a receipt for $270. He said your table wasn't paid. Emily frowned. What? No, Alex paid. He treated us. I nodded slowly. Yeah, but the receipt has his name on it. She looked away. I stood up, walked over to her purse, and pulled out the gold bracelet. By the way, where did you get this? She glanced at the bracelet, then at me. It was a gift from the team. They all chipped in. I twirled the bracelet in my fingers. And why is it engraved with 2/14? Emily froze. I could see the shadow of guilt cross her face. What are you implying? I'm just looking for the truth, I said calmly. She stood up abruptly. Are you accusing me of something? I want to know who you spent the evening with. She flushed. It was just a company party. If I call Alex, he'll confirm it. She opened her mouth but then fell silent. Now I knew everything. Emily paced the room, pale and nervous. Listen, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for you to find out. You just didn't want me to know, I said coldly. She clenched her fists. It doesn't mean anything. It means you lied to me, I shot back. You looked me in the face and lied. Emily grabbed her head. So what now? Are you going to kick me out? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. What are you doing? She asked, panic rising in her voice. Packing your things, I said, pulling out a suitcase. You have 2 hours. Are you insane? She screamed. I turned to face her. I'm not holding you back. The apartment and the car are in my name. You're nothing to me here. She grabbed my arm. Wait, let's just talk. We've already talked, I said, pulling away. She looked around, desperate. What about the kids? They'll stay with me. I shrugged. They'll stay with me. Emily staggered, clutching the back of a chair. Where will I go? I shrugged again. To Alex, I guess. She closed her eyes. You're really going to erase me just like that? I set the suitcase down in front of her. I'm not erasing you, Emily. You made that choice. She stared at me, wide-eyed. You loved me once. I picked up my phone and called a cab. Not anymore. She let out a shaky breath. Please. I turned away. 4 hours later, she was gone. A week after that, I filed for divorce. She tried to talk, begged me not to break up the family, but my mind was made up. Our son took my side immediately. Our daughter struggled at first, but eventually, she came around. Months later, I ran into Mark at a grocery store. Hey, he said awkwardly. Hey, I nodded, not in the mood for small talk. He hesitated. Did you hear about Emily? I looked at him more closely. What about her? She got fired, he said. And Alex. He stopped talking to her as soon as she left the company. I wasn't surprised. Mark hesitated again. Emily reached out to me. She says she regrets everything. I nodded silently. I didn't need to know more. 6 months after the divorce, Emily showed up at my door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. She looked tired, thinner, her eyes red and her lips trembling. Hi, she said weakly. I stared at her. Can we talk? She asked. About what? About us. I held back a bitter laugh. There is no us anymore. I know, she said, looking away. But maybe you can forgive me. I sighed. Emily, forgiveness isn't a ticket back. She lowered her head. I ruined everything. Yeah, you did, I said. But I still love you. I shook my head. It's too late. She bit her lip, wiping away a tear. I'm sorry. I closed the door without another word. She never came back after that. And you know what? I didn't feel anger or joy. Just emptiness. But unlike her, I could fill that void. I was free. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and subscribe. Thanks for listening until the end. See you in the next one.